This is Terms of Reference. I'm your host, Stephen Laddick. Would you be willing to give up everything you have and go into debt to help some of the most impoverished people in the world? And would your answer change if I told you that you had to jump off that cliff without knowing exactly how you'd go about helping those people? This is exactly what my guest for the 120th episode of the Terms of Reference podcast did when she founded the Blessing Baskets Project, an organization inspired by the small acts of kindness shown to her when life didn't work out as expected in 2002. Now, years later, Theresa Carrington and the Blessings Basket Project has not only helped thousands of women, but she's created a system for identifying, supporting, and ensuring that women entrepreneurs break out of poverty into prosperity. Theresa's my kind of entrepreneur. She jumped headfirst into solving the problems she identified without knowing anything about the business of helping those in need. She brought along some of the voices of the people she's helped along the way and those that she works with as well. And I think you'll find that it adds a little bit of extra inspiration to the show today. I spoke with Theresa in St. Louis. If you like what you're hearing, please take a moment to open up iTunes or whatever your podcast app is and subscribe. Also consider giving the show a rating because it really does help boost us up. And finally, please consider sharing this episode or the podcast on Facebook or Twitter to help others get on the train with us making aid and development better. Thanks a lot. Hello, Theresa. Thank you so much for being on the Terms of Reference podcast today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Theresa, we're recording this at the end of August. It's actually the last day of August in 2016. Where do we find you sitting today, knowing that you're a world traveler?
I'm sitting at my most favorite place in the world, and it's a place I call my place of peace, and that is my home just outside of St. Louis, Missouri. I live on about 1 acre here inside the city limits, so I've got this beautiful view. I'm looking out on a whole patch of zinnias that are in full bloom. It's very green here. It's actually, the temperature outside is quite low for this time of year, so fall is kind of in the air, and beautiful flowers are out my window, and it's a great day in the central part of the United States.
I think we can safely say you're in a good place. That was
I love my home.
So you're the founder of an organization called the Blessing Baskets Project. I mean, I guess, that's how you put it out there. Blessing Baskets. Why don't we, you brought to the show something, which I think is fantastic. No one, well, there's one other guest that did this, but you actually brought voices of your project with you. And why don't we listen to those two voices tell us about what Blessing Baskets is right now, and then we'll come back to you.
The Blessing Baskets goal is the woman will weave baskets for Blessing Basket for a certain period of time so that they can earn money and start their business and just busy with their business, and another poor woman or some can come and sit and weave their basket for change her life.
If they buy this basket, we come happy. We shall be up like other women in other countries. Without money, you can't be like another people. You have to be behind because of money. When you tell your friend that, where have you got that money? Say, Blessing Basket is the one who helps me to do these things, all these things. I have cattle, I have goats, I have hens. My children are going to school. So everything will be okay.
Mm-hmm. So we just heard from Chandan, I understand, and Sarah, correct?
That's right. So Chandan they're both country directors for the Blessing Basket Project. Sarah is headquartered out of Kampala, Uganda, and Chandan is headquartered out of Bangladesh. We work in an area there called Jigargacha, Bangladesh, Shamulia, Bangladesh, and he actually lives about 2 hours from there in Khulna, Bangladesh. So these two folks are real heroes in my book. They are the day in and day out on the ground in the trenches working with our artisans and making sure that the impact we are aiming to achieve is actually achieved. And you heard there from Chandan that we're really based in entrepreneurship. That is how we end poverty, is through entrepreneurship and accountability. We're very careful about our selection of people that we're working with. And then once they are selected into our program, our Graduate from Poverty model requires them to start 3 businesses during their time with us. And you heard Chandan talk a little bit about that. And what Sarah amplified is that not only are they starting businesses, but with this more than, or what we call a prosperity wage model that we invented, they're also able to start their businesses and take care of their families. So these two parts of our model combined are really the secret to the incredible impact that we're having around the world.
So give us some fundamentals on how the organization works and why you, a woman from Missouri, it finds herself, running this project and where did the idea come from? How did, was this, you woke up one day and said, I got to do this, or was this a slow burn, or what happened there?
It's definitely has been a marathon and not a foot race. It's been a long journey. I believe that each of us are uniquely equipped to do things in life, equipped in a way that no one else is equipped. And I could not figure out when I was growing up as an adopted kid below the poverty line on a farm in Kansas in the central part of the United States, why? Why was I stuck out there on that farm? Why did I have to deal with these cows? And why was there never enough money? And, I just couldn't understand why. And I wanted to leave that farm so fast as a young person. I embarked out on my own when I was 16 and have lived on my own ever since. And what I didn't know or didn't realize is that that farm was uniquely equipping me to understand what it's like to live below the poverty line, what it's like to have an opportunity presented to you, and what can become of your life when you make the most of that opportunity. And growing up with farm animals all around me, I have a unique understanding about what our artisans around the world are going through when they lose a crop or when they have a sick cow. So my life uniquely equipped me to talk to women all over the world and men all over the world who are living in poverty, but who know that if they could just be given a chance, they could make something out of an opportunity and transform their lives. So, I found out that I was uniquely equipped to do something. But when the cataclysmic moment came that all of that kind of turned into what you see today as the Blessing Basket Project, it was born out of tragedy. It was 1999. I went through a crisis in life. I was raising two young children, much like yourself. You've got three. I had two, a boy and a girl. They were 5 and 7, and life fell apart, totally fell apart. And people around me started giving me cards and letters of support, and I began to put them in a basket. And there were days I really didn't think I was going to make it. I'd come home from work and get the kids to bed and just thought, I don't think I can get up and do this again tomorrow. And I would see this basket there full of cards and letters. And I would go to that basket, reread those cards and letters, and feel empowered and feel a sense of responsibility that I needed to return to those people what they had invested in me. I thought, they've invested in me, and I got to get up and do this again tomorrow. And so slowly by slowly, piece by piece, I put my life back together. And that basket full of cards and letters became what I called my blessing basket. And there was a moment when I said, I can never pay these people back for what they did, but I can pay it forward. And in that moment, what you know today as the Blessing Basket Project was born. It's simply my attempt to pay forward what others have done for me in my life.
Wow, that is a powerful story. So take me through the fundamentals. How's it work? What happens?
We've invented two models over the course of the last 13 years that we've been doing this, and they are based on two very critical things: accountability and entrepreneurship. So there's poverty all over the world. We're currently working in 7 countries around the world. That is Ghana, Uganda, Kenya, Madagascar, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and Bangladesh. We'd be here a long time talking about how we landed in those countries, but that's where the universe landed us. And so an artist, first of all, the person has to have an artisan skill. And we primarily deal in baskets. Basket weaving is indigenous in all of these countries that I've talked about. And so we locate a group of artisans We make sure that we have a unique tool that's now patent pending, where when we have a group of people who want to join our program, we will send them through a very careful selector that, as I said, we've developed. And so we're looking for the most entrepreneurial, poorest, most entrepreneurial people within a zone, within an area. And once we find that particular group of people, we'll then have them start making artisan goods. We will pay them more than anyone in the world for those goods, what we call a prosperity wage, which means they will earn at least 2.5 times fair trade. In Bangladesh, we're up to 7 times fair trade, where we can drive as much money back into the hand of the artisan as possible. We do that. So we arrive, we carefully select, we have them start making their artisan good. We're going to provide quality training, a lot of other support training that goes along with it. We will then tell that person's story. We have developed unique technologies that enable us to put the very face of the very artisan on the very basket that they made. It's typically baskets, as I said. And then we'll also check in with that person on their journey as they're making their journey out of poverty. We'll take those goods, ship them to the United States, and where we sell them throughout North America. We're in the United States and in Canada. We've developed a fairly robust market for our artisan goods throughout the U.S. and Canada, and this year alone we'll sell about 70,000 units.
How much does a unit go for? How big is the organization?
So our annual revenue is about $2 million. 80% of our revenue is earned from the sale of the artisan goods. 20% of the revenue is earned from grants. It's the baskets and or other artisan goods that we're selling will sell anywhere from about $10 all the way up. I think our most expensive basket is $55. So somewhere in that range.
Again, bridge the gap for me. How did a girl from Missouri, or from Kansas, as you sort of described yourself, how did you get to yourself to a place where you're like, look, I've got to invent this technology. I've got to do this. Did you go buy the first baskets, yourself in your travels, and you brought them back and you saw you sell them? Or did you craft this whole model at once, or how has this evolved over time? I mean, ultimately, I'm driving at is we're here and we're interested in talking about the innovation in how we deliver assistance to people, right? There's many of the people who are listening to the show, they've been in development a long time, they've been in assistance. We've all heard or we've seen the local goods, the artisan goods story. So what makes yours different? Why is yours either working or is thriving here 13 years later where maybe others have failed?
There, I think, are several critical components. Number one is we always put the artisan first. Our whole focus is making sure that artisan is receiving as much money as possible. And I have to tell you, in the early days of the organization, I was heavily criticized by people that we would consider experts, academia, people who were in aid at that time. Just highly criticized my model. We were one of the first, if not the first, organization to put money directly into the hands of a poor person, and not a little bit, but a lot.
What we call cash assistance today, basically?
Yeah, but it's not assistance. I mean, we're paying them significantly beyond market rate for their artisan goods. So they produce that good, they come to a table, and we're going to pay them cash for that good. And it's not just fair trade, it's prosperity wage, which is this in that space between fair trade and prosperity wage, which is, as I said, at least 2.5 times fair trade. That gap right there, that difference is where the entrepreneurship happens. It's where cataclysmic change occurs in their life. So the fundamental difference between us and anybody else that before us had brought in an artisan good is our financial model. That artisan earning significantly more than fair trade. I can tell you that, exactly how long it takes a woman to tip from poverty into prosperity. I can tell you, why do we have them start 3 businesses? Well, that's not by accident. That's very purposeful. We know that it takes 3 businesses. We know how long it takes those businesses to go through their startup cycle. Their first business will fail. It almost 100% of the time it fails. So we have to be willing to remain with that artisan until they recover from their first business loss. So we know what that whole business cycle looks like. We know what's happening in their homes. For example, when we find a woman, the only thing she can see when we find her is her feet. She can only look down. And in the process of working with her, there's a whole process, emotional process that she's going through that ultimately ends in her looking ahead into the future, dreaming. When we get to a woman to the point where she can start to dream, everything changes. So the fundamental difference between our organization and why it's so successful and why we've impacted so many people and others who have done similar but haven't been as successful is the prosperity wage model and the accountability part of our graduate from poverty model, which requires the artisan to start 3 businesses. They have a finite period of time in which to start those businesses. We don't care what they are. I've got people doing everything from brewing beer to running photography studios.
I was just going to say, do you have? I was wondering if that was part of the model, or you just say, look, it has to be a business.
We don't care what it is, and to us, a business can be 2 cows, 2 chickens, anything that starts a flywheel of resources coming into their life. So you've been around aid long enough to know that when you give a woman even a single cow, a milking cow, life changes, because that cow can be bred, cow will have babies, cow can be milked, the milk can be sold, she can start raising, calves and sell those off, et cetera, et cetera. So it's that difference between fair trade and prosperity wage where entrepreneurship and poverty come together and poverty ends. It will end in her life. But she's got to do her part. We kick people out.
I was just going to say, what's your?
I don't apologize about it.
What's your sort of intake rate and what's your dropout rate? Like how many artisans are you bringing into the organization on an annual basis, and how many are graduating? How many are dropping out? Like what do those kind of numbers look like?
Okay, so how many we bring in on an annual basis? We're right now running at about 500 coming in a year. We will have not that many exiting in a year. Our program, it runs 3 to 5 years time, depending on the individual. So Susie will come in to the program, depending on the number of dependents she has, will determine how long she's going to be in the program. So we carefully screen. So they're going to be in there from anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So there's not an annual turnover like what you're thinking. And remember, these models didn't invent themselves immediately. We had been around for about 8 years before they really started to crystallize. And so starting in 2010, we held our very first graduation ceremony. And in that very first one, 25 people formally graduated out. We have a good number of people, so I'd say maybe in the 3% range, that, and by the way, we work with about 3,500 artisans at any given time, that self-exit. They don't talk to us about it. They just leave. And they leave because they've accomplished everything they needed and everything they wanted to do. And they're like, yeah, love you, mean it, bye-bye. And that's okay with us too. So we have self-exiters, people who determine when they want to, that they feel like they're ready way ahead of time and they just leave. We have folks that want to be part of a formal graduation ceremony. They come to us and say, I think I'm ready to graduate. And then we'll go and do an in-home investigation. And there's a whole process we go through. Big reports are made because we want to make sure that if they're ready, that they really are ready. So there's a lot of markers that we're looking for there. And then we'll hold a gigantor party. And we dance, we sing, we celebrate. They're given actual graduation certificates, and they're out. They totally graduate out. So hopefully that's helping you with a little bit of the numbers. At any given time, we're working with about 3,500 artisans. We've graduated about 250 or so formally out of the program. We've had hundreds self-exit on their own, and we're ever growing, so we're always taking in more people. So
the one number you didn't give me was the dropout rate of people who you think are fit for purpose, but then either fizzle out or don't make it.
I'm sighing heavily because it's dependent upon the country, and it's not a number, frankly, that I've paid much attention to. So I'll go with a country that I kind of know a little, that we have a higher dropout rate than most, and that's going to be in Ghana. And in Ghana, I know there we've got about 1,800 artisans, and It's a very educated guess that we've probably over time kicked out about 200 people.
Nice.
Over the course of our time. And what gets a person kicked out? Why would we kick them out of the program? There's some real definite markers. The Blessing Basket Project in Ghana will stick there. We place an order for enough products that we're shipping out a container a month. So their orders are coming in basically nonstop. First thing we look for is quality. We want to make sure that that person is producing a quality product. Keep in mind, we're holding all kind of training, all manner of training. So if a product reaches our door and it is rejected from that artisan 3 times over a period of time, we're going to ask them to leave. But that won't come as a shock to them. We will talk to them the first time that a product is rejected, the second time a product is rejected, and then tell them, hey, listen, if you don't get on board with the training and everything else that we're giving you and can't produce a quality item, it's because you're not trying hard enough, and it's because you don't need this project enough. Otherwise, you would be trying harder. So we have a 3 strikes and you're out policy in terms of quality. We have a 3 purchase order policy and you're out, where if over the course of that many months, 3 or 4 months, you don't show up for an order, you don't participate in an order, you're not presenting products, the first thing we're going to do is make sure you're all right. That's a number one thing we're going to do. And provided you're all right and you just don't feel like, being a part of the
showing up, basically.
Yeah, if you're not going to show up, then you don't really need our help. So we're going to ask you to leave and make room for someone else. So it's quality based, it's participatory based, and then those are the 2 major things that we're going to ask you to leave over. And I've not seen anybody be removed from the program for anything other than those 2 things. We're going to also look for things like behavior. If you've harmed somebody, or there's fighting, or you've been put in jail, or these are real radical things where just in general you are a disruption to meetings or to the overall process, we don't want you to be a part of our family. We really want people taking up the precious few slots that we have who are absolutely determined to get out of poverty. And we're providing them a pathway, but they got to walk down it. So it's when I get into the country, the term that I use often is "Mama, don't take no mess." I've come a long way. I've come a long way to help you, and we're going to do this together. We are in this together, but you got to do your part. This is not a handout. And if you are not willing to work hard and start those 3 businesses and do the work necessary to get out of poverty, you better leave right now. And I've actually had people get up and leave, which is awesome.
Yeah, sure.
We don't pay people to come to meetings. We don't do anything like that. They have to be accountable in the process. And I think that's a fundamental key to what makes our programs work is we don't mess around. We don't, you got to be serious, or we're going to ask you to leave. Basically, get in or get the hell out of the way, because we've got other people who really want to be a part of what we're doing here. And they're only in for a limited period of time. And that's the other thing. We tell them this is not forever. If you just think you hit a gravy train somewhere, you are so wrong. You've got between 3 and 5 years. And if in that time you don't take advantage of this program, then shame on you. And I guess that's one area I didn't cover is the other thing that will happen is that as they get close to that 3 to 5 year mark, we're looking to see what have you done with the opportunity. And if you've done nothing, we're going to ask you to leave. You're not going to be able to, even though if you've showed up and you've done the quality and that kind of thing, we realize you've just been hanging out and you're not investing in your businesses. But it should never get to the point where we discover that right at the end, because we're checking in with our artisans twice a year. We're providing updates, and you and I haven't yet talked about the technology where all of that is being displayed for folks who are buying their products in the United States. That's a critical part of the process.
I want to go there next, because I know you and I we've talked before, and I wanted to make sure that we definitely went down that path, because the technology was something that you were really proud of. But first, before we go there, this is usually about the point in the show where I ask, what's your favorite, there's always that one story that you can tell over a beer or over a glass, cup of coffee or something about, the 1 or 2 people that you hold up and you say, hey, this is a woman I helped, or this is a woman who had a huge outcome or something like that. Again, you brought some clips. Why don't we listen to some of the participants at this stage right now, talk about how they've been, they've benefited or what outcomes they've had, and then we'll come back to you.
The biggest moment was the arrival at the girls' school, the welcome at the girls' school, and getting to interact with the girls who Blessing Basket Project and Whole Foods Market are directly impacting. All those girls are weavers. I mean, they want to learn so bad. They're going to walk an hour to get to school. They're going to weave baskets at night so they can be in school. And they're just bright, beautiful, intelligent, strong young women. And it's just, you just see all this potential when you're around them.
This madam, a white Theresa, she gets interested so much with these baskets. She buys them. We get much money. We have constructed houses from this money. So we thank much Madame Theresa for the nice payments she always do to women.
We just heard from a number of your beneficiaries, for lack of a better term. I'm not a big fan of that particular label myself, but why don't you, if it's important, why don't you walk us through what we just heard, if you think that there's more details that we need to know, and then tell us some of your favorite stories.
Well, I think when Lydia talks about people building houses, that was a real moving moment for me as I realized the impact we were making. This would have been in, her interview was done much after, but when I first started getting word that people were building houses, they were coming out from underneath what I'll call natural structures of literally twigs and leaves and grass, and actually building brick buildings for homes, very sturdy, much safer for their families. That was the moment I realized we were onto something. And so when I hear Lydia talking about building houses, that we still see that happening today. We know when we're having huge impact on an area because we see housing start to happen. First thing we see that starts to happen is people go from a natural roof to a metal roof. And so you can tell where Blessing Basket's been because the roofs in the whole area will all be tin, or what they call zinc, a metal roof. So yeah, that's when I knew we were onto something, and that it was time to start putting corners on it and edges on it and start to define it and what was making it work and all of that.
Do you have another story besides those two? I mean, obviously you brought those two stories to this conversation, but is there another one that, again,
Oh, yeah.
you're at a donor, you're at a one of your markets or whatever, and what's your favorite story that you pull out about a woman who's come out of poverty?
I think the one that is close, I've got a number of them. It's very hard to narrow it down to one, but there is a woman named Majida, and she lives in Bangladesh. And she was married at the age of 14, of course, forced into that marriage at the age of 14. She'd never been to school. She couldn't read. She couldn't write. And she also couldn't have children. And her husband would beat her and just, every stereotypical thing that you could think of in terms of a woman not having rights, and she was just literally emotionally and physically beaten when we found her. And when we found her, she was weaving for a middleman who was selling her baskets as fairly traded in the United States. He was paying Majida the U.S. equivalent of $1 for that basket. The Blessing Basket Project Prosperity Wage Model came in. Majida became a part of our program, and we started paying her the U.S. equivalent of $12 for that exact same basket. And her life irrevocably changed. I just got back from Bangladesh not long ago, and Majida has indeed built a lovely brick home that I am going to try to stay in the next time I go there. It's so nice. She has her pigeons. She has goats. She has bought land. That's a huge one for a woman in Bangladesh, that she bought and owns in her own name land where she has planted rice. When I asked Majida, what does it feel like to know that you will never go hungry again? And I'm talking to her in these beautiful green fields of rice in Bangladesh. She's got her ankle deep in water and mud in the rice field. She just looked up to the sky and raised her hands. She will never go hungry again a day in her life. And she was in our program for only 3 short years when she made all of that progress. She had woven for that middleman for 13 years.
That's powerful.
So, yeah.
No,
yeah. So Majida, I'm so proud of her. She's doing incredibly well. She's a graduate. She still comes to all of our meetings when I'm there and says hello, and we hang out and have tea, and she doesn't need our help. So it's a sustainable exit from poverty, and that's the other thing that we do is we make sure that people are out and they're out sustainably.
That's awesome. Before we were talking about sort of the outcomes, we listened to those last 2 clips. We had started touching on the topic of the technology that you use within the Blessing Baskets Project to bring these stories to the people who are buying them. Why don't you tell us about that?
So we've invented technology from the ground up that we call Artisan in You. And I invented it for a lot of reasons, not the least of which was Majida. It made me mad when I found out how her baskets were being represented in the United States. And I thought people have a right to know. People have a right to talk to the person whose artisan good they are purchasing so that they can find out for themselves whether or not they're really making a difference.
Especially in today's day and age of, I'm in Bangkok, you're in Missouri. We can talk. These things are possible.
That's exactly right. So I thought, you know what? I cannot go around and say that organization who was buying Majida's baskets was a bad organization. That wouldn't work because they were doing some good work, of course, but they weren't representing her products honestly. What happens when we are able to turn on the light? What happens when a consumer is able to actually talk to the artisan? And so it was Majida who was the one who inspired me, along with all the other artisans, but hers primarily. I thought, you know what? People deserve the chance to talk to her. They need to see her story. They need to understand exactly what she's going through. And so we invented this technology called Artisan in You. And what it does is it enables us to put the very face of the very artisan who made the very product on their basket. Not only that, we check in with that artisan twice a year. We find out what are those businesses that they're starting, what's going on in their life, what are their successes, what are their failures. Those are put into the system as well. People who have purchased Majida's baskets are given an alert. Something's happening with Majida. Log in and see what's going on with her. They're shown all of the products that she can make. They're able to write Majida a letter. She is able to write them back. We have a team of translators in some larger than others in our countries, but the way it essentially works is Majida will come to the table, present her baskets. The country director will see that Majida has a letter waiting from North America. He'll click on that, translate it in her local language, and she will give her response. And this is Chundan we're talking about now, and Chundan will translate it into English and send it back to us. And so we have translators all over in our countries. It's often the country director. In other cases, in Ghana, we got so many letters from North America to our artisans that we actually had to hire a guy. We had to give him a motorcycle, I had to give him a computer, I had to give him internet technologies, and he runs around all day translating letters. I had no idea the response that was going to come in. People deserve the opportunity to talk to the person who made their artisan good, especially if that good is being presented as one that is helping lift people out of poverty. So this is the world's largest artisan engagement program. We built it from the ground up. Thousands of artisans across 7 countries, 3 continents, 40-some villages are part of it, and there's none other like it in the world. And it was hearing the stories of the people and being passionate that their voice gets heard, their story gets heard, and that people can have a 2-way conversation with them.
You've described what sounds like a very mature, robust process, a very mature, robust system. I mean, you said you've been doing this for 13 years. You've figured out a lot. You've made mistakes. You've got your prosperity wage model. You've got your technology. You've got clearly a market that moves 70,000 or so units. What's the next 5 years? Is it scale? Is it? Do you have other things up your sleeve that you're going to be pulling out there, or what is it?
Yeah. So first of all, it's doing things like this, Stephen, telling folks about what we're doing and why it's different. But most importantly, it's sharing. I hope something I've shared with you here today has caused, another person, another organization listening, maybe it's given them an idea. So key to our next, chapter is sharing what we know. We could have the best poverty eradication models in all the world, which we think we do. But if we don't share them, what good have we really done? Yes, we've helped thousands of people in these 7 countries, and that's awesome, and some people would be satisfied with that. But if we don't share the models and share what we know works across race, religion, geography, culture, all of that, these models work across all of those things. If we don't share those, shame on us. So we want to pay into society what our organization and collectively our artisans together over the last 13 years have developed, and collectively as a whole community, our artisans and ourselves, that we know work. So why wouldn't we share that to others? So sharing our models is very much going to be a part of what we're doing, and it starts with programs like yours. So thank you for that opportunity. The other part of it is that we want to see our model rolled out in North America. So we're working on some exciting projects in North America to find out how could our models help people who live in impoverished communities in the United States. And remember, I was a kid living below the poverty line. I know what that's like, and I have those unique set of skills, plus all that I've learned globally, to be able to apply it domestically. And we're working with a prestigious university in St. Louis, Washington University, to explore some of those concepts. It's in its early stages, but the meetings are happening quickly, and some very exciting conversations are on the table. So what could our impact be in North America with the models? How can we share the models? And then, of course, we have many, many countries on our waiting list. We have hundreds, if not into the thousands, of artisans on our waiting list. So I believe that you have to practice what you preach. So, of course, our organization itself will do some scaling, but not scaling for scaling's sake. It's scaling to go where there is significant need, where we've been asked to go. So for us, it's not about how big can we get. It's about what kind of impact are we making in the life of the artisan. So I don't see a day under my leadership anyway that we would be serving hundreds of thousands of people, because I'm not fully convinced you can do that truly effectively. I like our small number of about 3,000 to 3,500 at any given time. It's manageable. It cuts out a lot of crap. So, bringing that, kind of keeping around that same number, but working in other countries will also be part of what we do.
You told us that, you said 80% of your income comes from the selling of your baskets, and about 20% comes from grants. What was the seed that got this started? Did this come out of your back pocket or? Okay.
Oh yeah. I launched the whole organization on credit cards. And I sold everything I owned. I
Awesome.
literally sold everything I owned. I had a really good job.
So
I
we
was
can
a
call you. We
journalist
can call
for 20 years. So.
We can call you a true believer.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I had everything on the line, and started it on credit cards. Had amassed $40,000 in credit card debt that I had sent all over the world, with absolutely zero way to pay for that except to start selling my personal belongings, which is exactly what I did. I sold my house, I sold jewelry, I sold furniture, I had garage sales, I held auctions, and this is all while I'm trying to take care of two little kids. So it was, frankly, one hell of a burden to put them through. I sacrificed everything. And the question would be why? Why would it was... I had everything on the line, and I wouldn't recommend people do it that way. Of course, it ravaged me financially. It's issues that I'm still dealing with today. I am not whole financially whole. I would be in a completely different financial space had I made different choices in the beginning. So why did I do that? I was firmly convinced that if I was going to enter into international aid, a space I knew nothing about, a space I had not received any formal training, then I had better do it better than anybody in the world. And in order to do that, I needed to give it everything I had. I left my job and focused on it 100%. And in that process, because I'd never been trained on the rules, air quote, rules of poverty eradication, I broke all of the rules. And it was in that moment that true innovation began happening. And that's one of the key reasons that you see that we're so successful today. So that's how it started. And like I said, I'm still trying to repair my life financially from those days 13 years ago.
I always end each interview with asking these two questions, and I'm pretty excited to hear your answer. At least we'll see what happens. But who do you pay attention to when it comes to learning new things? What blogs do you read? What magazines do you read? How do you keep yourself abreast of maybe some new little piece of technology that might help the project, or just might help the project in some way? Do you have a list of things, or do you have some 2 or 3 go-to things that you pay attention to?
Well, I do. I've got obviously through the UNAOC, who we both who know very well. Through that environment, I've been recently introduced to some amazing programs in the world. And what that taught me is the places that I had been going, it shows you that there's so much else happening in the world. So the Intercultural Innovation Award, past winners, current winners, future winners would be something that I would encourage everybody to watch and to listen to. Prior to knowing about that organization and the good work that they're doing, I would be frankly listening and watching in the field. Some of our greatest innovations actually come from our artisans. I talk to them. What do you wish could happen? How do you want to be connected to the world? What do you wish could be? And some of our most interesting and greatest innovations have come from those conversations with the people that we're actually helping. And in terms of additional, resources here on the ground, I'm just ferociously read online every, I look a lot at news, to be frank with you. I look at news coverage, the way stories are being told. That always sharpens my storytelling ability for our artisans. So it's just a mishmash of the people that we're serving. Now, of course, the whole UN family. And in addition to that, news outlets and the stories that they're telling of innovation that occur all over the world. So don't know if that's as exciting as what you had hoped it to be, but that's how we do it.
Okay, so absolutely, it's always I always love the grab bag of that question. But here's an even better one. You're an innovator. You literally sold your life. You are what if you read any sort of entrepreneur literature, you are a case study in someone who put themselves in the place of hunger, right? You put yourself in a place of it's got to work or else, right?
Right.
Who else is out there? What is there another project? Is there another person? Is there another thing that isn't related to blessing baskets at all that you've discovered or that you would love to get a shout out to, just to give them a little notification as well?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of them. Through the UN award, I met some amazing people. All of the Intercultural Innovation winners are great, but the one that really stuck out to me was somebody that you've already interviewed, and that's Libby Powell. I think what Libby is doing to bring a voice to and amplify the voices of people within their own country, and she's really empowering nations and empowering the younger voices within nations. And I think her work is tremendously important in changing the balance of power. So I'm really impressed with Libby Powell and her work at On Our Radar. And if folks haven't listened to your podcast with her, they really should. They're missing something. So I'd encourage them to do that. Then there's another organization in Ghana that I'm just coming to know that I'm excited to hear about, and it's called What Went Wrong. And they are an organization that studies where foreign aid has gone wrong. And I absolutely love that, because when I travel all over the world and I see where aid went wrong, abandoned buildings, abandoned machinery, more harm that was left in the wake of the good that was left behind, absolutely think that's somebody needs to be reporting on that. It's an embarrassment to international aid when it goes wrong and no one takes accountability. When funding dries up, people disappear. And I will not forget a conversation that I had with my chief in Niarga, Ghana. I was interviewing him about our project. We'd been on the ground for about 5 years. And I said, his name is Chief Dompoyea. And I said, Chief Dompoyea, what makes Blessing Basket Project different? He very simply said, you didn't leave. You kept coming back. And so the folks at Want What Wrong point out what happens when aid dries up and people don't come back. And we really, as a international aid family, we've got a lot of gaps to close. We're working hard every day to make sure that we're not one of those organizations, and that we give support to other folks like Libby and others that we come across, where we can collaborate and help them become stronger.
Theresa, thank you so much for the conversation today. It's been inspiring, and we wish you all the best for the future.
All right. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the Terms of Reference podcast from aidpreneur.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes.